Hi and welcome to ABG Sundal Collier's Investor Days. My name is Hanna Forsgren and I work as an equity research analyst. I am happy to welcome Anders Storm, Group CEO for Sivers Semiconductors. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Hanna. Happy to be here. My name is Anders Storm. I'm the Group CEO of Sivers. I've been with Sivers now for almost 8 years. I've sort of almost 3 decades in the data telecom industry. And I've been working on the sort of turnaround of Sivers now for a couple of years. So to tell you a little bit about Sivers, Sivers is a company who works with sort of very high-tech solutions. We have 2 business units. One is within wireless, where we have 5G and SATCOM products. And the other one is within photonics, where we have different lasers for sensors and datacom type of products. Today we have about 43 design wins within 5G and SATCOM, and about 19 customer engagement within the photonics business. Today we are about 132 people. We have our head office here in Stockholm. We're listed at the main market, mid cap here at Nasdaq. We also have offices in Glasgow, where we have our fab for the compound semiconductors, the photonics stuff. And we also have offices now in the US after the acquisition of Mixcom a bit of a year ago. What are we actually doing then? We are doing the technology that sends out sort of the data or the light or the radio waves into the air. And we do that for high speed or silicon photonics or autonomous driving or radar. So it's actually the light or the sort of radio waves. That's our technology, how we take it from the digital world into the world of the analog world, basically. And we do that for a lot of extremely interesting mega trends that is up and coming and also here right now. So high-speed broadband for fiber to the home or 5G. We have a lot of customers in that. We have customers now in autonomous driving for LiDARs. We have silicon photonics, where we do things with AR labs that are doing really interesting things with our technology. SATCOM order, we got one on Friday. We're going to talk more about that. It's a really big one, our area. Augmented reality, we do lasers for that. We also have health monitoring type of things. So where is Sivers coming from? I mean, in 2016, we were on Aktier Spotlight. We had a turnover about 18 million kronor. We've been sort of redoing the whole company with all new products since then. We've been sort of acquiring companies over time. We started with the photonics business in 2017. We moved to Nasdaq First North at that point as well in November. We started to bring in more and more investors. I think we had about 800 investors from the beginning. Now we're about 20,000 investors in the company. We progressed over time and added design wins and up now over 40 design wins. We also listed on the main market, and we did another acquisition and M&A, and we're accelerating the revenue now as we stand. And it's been a couple of sort of challenging years now over the pandemic, but now we really see an interesting future. Just to look a little bit about sort of what kind of things have happened over the sort of 2022 where we've seen an acceleration. We always talked about the second half of 2022 being where we sort of will see a start of acceleration sort of after the post-pandemic stuff. So we've been growing this year, 23% so far over year on year. We have a sort of integrated a transformative acquisition of Mixcom, getting into completely new areas, especially SATCOM, where we just took this huge order on Friday, which is sort of very interesting. And we are actually now using the whole wireless company to deliver on this order. So it's not just the people from Mixcom, but also within the former Sivers Wireless that can bring in this thing. So we're seeing more things, and there's a lot of that kind of things that can happen in the future. We also got multiple orders this year from our sort of big Fortune 100 customer, a consumer electronics company, which we've been working with 4 years now. They have totally invested in development, 130 million. So now they're just the second largest company when it comes to NRE with us. So that's very interesting for the future volume production for sensors for consumer electronics. And the 170 million SATCOM order, I'm going to go into that. We got our first sort of larger 5G order this year for 20 million SEK. We added another Fortune 100 US customer this year as well. We're working with sort of very future winners like within photonics with AR Labs, for example. We have a new company in South Korea who's doing things for sort of transparent antenna for mobile phones where we can actually have sort of 5G into the metaverse. And in total, actually now from the 12th of September, we added 210 million in order inflow in the company. And that's an absolute record for the company, which is a very good start on the growth journey that we see ahead. If we look at photonics, what is that? It's actually something completely new that hasn't been done really before. It's actually merging the sort of light sources with the standard silicon that we use today in all different applications, where you have a possibility to get sort of light directly from the silicon, and you can do and miniaturize this, and you can do really interesting things. Most of our customers now are based on this kind of technology. We have some really interesting patents on the type of waveguides that you can do to get the light from the silicon into the light source and then send this out into a data center or into some kind of sensor in that type. This market is really an emerging market, and we do that in a material called indium phosphide, and that's a material that needs to be used to actually do a good laser. You can't do that on silicon. So this type of material is sort of driving this market, and looking at Joule saying this is going to be a huge growth going forward. Microwave Journal was even mentioning sort of indium phosphide is the holy grail of consumer electronics in the future. So we see a very, very interesting market. And as I mentioned, we have one consumer electronic customer, which has already invested 130 million just in getting a sensor to the market. And that's before volume production. So that's a heavy investment. Another project we're really proud of being part of is with one of the coolest companies in California right now called AR Labs. They're doing a solution to be able to send light between the CPUs within high-speed computers in the future instead of electricity on copper. So this is a technology where you can see this array here where we have 8 different frequencies in the lasers, and we can send 2 terabit of data with 90% less energy consumption. So it's very sustainable also for the future of the data centers. And this company has recently got investors like NVIDIA, Intel, HP. Everybody wants to be part of this, and we are a sub-supplier of these lasers to make this happen. So this is an extremely interesting market. If you want to know more about that, look at our Capital Markets Day, where their CEO is talking about that himself. And he is saying that there is sort of a $7 billion SAM, serviceable addressable market in the future for these kind of things in the future. So we are starting sort of the first type of volume production next year, and we're working with them currently to get sort of into the qualification phase on this product. Talking a bit more about this sort of consumer electronics company, I mean, we've been getting orders. The first order in 2018 was 20 million SEK, and we got orders all the way to now. This year has been the biggest year for us so far. Feels really, really good. We cannot, of course, promise that this is going to go to volume, but if it goes to volume, this is a huge opportunity for us. You usually say that you can get everything from sort of 2 to 10x in the volumes per year in this when the volume comes. So it's very, very interesting. This is another Fortune 100 customer that we signed in May. This was just sort of a 7 million order, but this is light sources for augmented reality type of things. Also extremely interesting. We'll see if that comes to the next phase. This is still early phase, but this is the kind of customers we're signing up now, thanks to all the work we've been doing also with the first Fortune 100. If we look at the wireless business, we already sort of have signed up a lot of design wins, as you call it. We have that ranging from everywhere in 5G, sort of fixed wireless access, which is sort of broadband solutions. We have track to train, where you can get it into the trains. We have a lot of different things. Here you can see the 11 sort of customers and 23 ready hardwares that is out there in the market already. It's ranging from companies like Adtran and Cambium, which is sort of tier 2 listed NASDAQ companies in the US, all the way to smaller startup that does really cool things with backhaul and replacing wired technology in the building. So our technology, with just a few type of sort of chipsets, we can actually service a very, very large market. This market is sort of growing. It has been a bit delayed compared to what we saw from the beginning. But as you can see, sort of the 5G millimeter wave here in 2019 was sort of a $53 million market. That's going to go to a $2.7 billion market in 2026. So it is coming, but it's been sort of delayed for a few different reasons. In the US, for example, they've invested in some lower frequency while they were sort of doing these high band frequencies as well. Looking at sort of what we're doing in the SATCOM industry, it's quite interesting. The sort of the Allspace customer who was on our Capital Markets Day, they are talking about a completely new type of satellite terminal where you can actually beam steer. Before we had these big dishes and you had to point them in one direction, and sometimes you have very slow mechanical movement to sort of point at the satellite that was geostationary, which is sort of standing still at one spot and following the Earth's rotation. Now we're using sort of medium Earth satellites and low orbit satellites like the Starlink, where you can actually, they fly around, thousands of them, and you sort of mix and match between and connect. This solution is the first solution who actually can connect to any stationary and have double number of connections at the same time, make before break, which is really interesting for military type of applications, for example, where Allspace is really strong right now and have done a lot of testing. And as you know, right now, military applications are quite important at this current geopolitical situation. So talking about the big order and what that is all about. So looking at what we're doing now, when we acquired Mixcom, we got what's called beamformers, and which is part of the current generation of this customer we're talking about. With this order, we're also adding 2 other chipsets into that solution that's going to be the next generation. So we're going to have 4 type of chipsets in the second generation ground station. And they are paying us 170 million over a sort of a period until June. 75% of that is going to be revenue recognized over the coming year, which is sort of comparing to 100 million turnover today. It's sort of doubling the turnover just with this order from this specific customer. And also, I mean, looking at the chipset volumes and so forth, this is a 50 billion SEK total addressable market. So if we can see this sort of growth here to 2030, if our customer becomes really successful, the volumes are going to come and be quite substantive. And we're talking about sort of a multiple of what this is in sort of volume orders. And we already have volumes ordered for the current chipsets that are going to start from next year. So that's about, of those 210 million we have now, there's about 20 million for Q1 to Q3 next year that's going to be delivered. And that's just for small, very small volumes, as you can see in the beginning. So we expect this to grow very quickly later on. And here is sort of part of that order that we released in 21st of October. So summarizing this sort of, I mean, we are now in a lot of different very interesting areas. Please look at our Capital Markets Day and hear what these CEOs are saying themselves about their solutions. They are saying that Sivers technology is vital for our solution. We are the technology that get the signals from what they're doing out into the air or out into the analog world. So without our technology, these things will not happen. So very important, and I'm so happy to be sort of partnering with these guys, be part of these kind of things, but there's a lot more other things. Also to understand sort of, okay, we are a semiconductor company and you are all sort of way back in the bus, and there's other people who's going to sort of deliver these things. So there's long lead times in some cases. So looking at AR Labs and Allspace here, for example, you can see that indirectly, the customers we have is like NVIDIA, Intel, HP, and Lockheed Martin via Allspace or via AR Labs. Via Allspace, we have US Army, SCS, which is SATCOM company, Boeing, Telsat, Inmarsat. All of those guys becomes our customers. If we look at the sort of 5G stuff, we can talk about rail operators like EVO Rail, who now is rolling out these sort of things in the UK. We are more and more getting into the defense industry, and you might have seen Dagens Industri yesterday went out with sort of Sivers is getting more and more into the defense industry, and we have US Army, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and so forth via these things. On top of that, we have the photonic sensors within consumer electronics, and we have automotive things within LiDAR and so forth. So it's a huge amount of opportunities that we are trying to address. And the total market for this is sort of a $10 billion market where we sort of, who is addressable for us. And we're starting to see now going from these development contracts, which we also going into volume going forward, we're seeing some volume orders coming. So to summarize all of this, first 9 months, still okay growth, 23%. We expect much more than that in the future, as you've seen from the order pipeline. Photonics received sort of more orders within the Fortune 100 customers. Transformative acquisition of MixComm, which is going to change a lot of things. I don't think you've seen everything yet, what we're doing, but there's a lot of things happening. And we're seeing a positive move with many customers due to that. The SATCOM order, of course, on Friday, ground changing and very important for us to get into that market. And we're going to see more satellite customers coming. We have a new one, Fortune 100. We have 5G orders as well, even if it's slower, but it's coming. And to summarize, I mean, 210 million in orders just from 12th of September to today is way sort of good for us and moving us in the right direction here in the future. So thank you very much, and I open up for questions.
Thank you very much, Anders. So my first question is, could you please walk us through the economics of your business? What sort of maintainable margins can an investor expect in the longer run? Yeah.
So if we look at sort of, there are two parts of our sort of revenue coming from. One is the sort of development, where we have about 70% of what we call NRE, non-recurring engineering, which is 7% of revenue right now, and then we go into volume. So for that, we've been lying around 40 to 60% in gross margins. When it comes to the hardware that we're selling, it's dependent on the volumes and so forth, but it's also going to be similar. So 40 to 60% is sort of the standard gross margins for semiconductor companies. And of course, the better you do it, the closer to 60% you get. But that's sort of where we are targeting to be.
Your technology has broad use cases: 5G, fiber optic, communication, and optical sensing. How do all these fit together in the larger scheme of things, and which use case is the most likely to dominate going forward?
So it all connects via this, as I said, taking things from the digital to the analog world. So we are the sort of people who can sort of translate the digital data into an analog data out in the world. So I mean, that's the important thing here, that we are really good at that, and we can do that both for sort of light and radio waves. So that connects to how the customers are sort of doing their stuff and how they're developing their things. I think that sort of there's so many opportunities here, so it's almost impossible to say who's going to be sort of the biggest ones. But I still think that all of these, silicon photonics, going to be huge. SATCOM is sort of obviously now moving very, very quickly, and 5G is a bit delayed, but it's still going to be a very large chunk of the revenue in the future. So I think it's going to be a mix of all three, actually.
All right. Recently, you announced that you signed a strategic development agreement with a European satellite communication company. Could you please briefly explain the importance of this agreement?
Yeah, so it is sort of bringing us into a sort of a very strategic partnership with this customer. First of all, we got from MixComm these beamformers and got them into their SATCOM solution. Now we're going deeper and sort of increasing the value of what we are providing to this customer, and we're becoming sort of one of their most important suppliers when it comes to sort of chipsets. So that is, of course, very important. And then they put the trust in us to deliver these things. It is sort of also huge for us in the way, seeing that we can actually do not just sort of volume orders in the future, but also larger NRE projects and delivering them. So I think it's a substantial importance, and it also shows that in this environment where we're probably going to see sort of the world's going into a sort of slowing down everything. We're seeing high interest rates and all of that, but we are quite sure that now we can go straight against that market and grow independently what happens, because all of these things we're working on, including military and everything, that's like electricity and water. People are just going to need that. So now we can see that growth, and we passed the pandemic in that sense, so we can now relax in those things.
Supply chain issues and high semiconductors demand were two important topics last year. Now it seems that large global semiconductors business are guiding for lower global semiconductor capex. How are you impacted by these macro trends, and what is your take on the present circumstances?
Yeah, so I see it as fairly positive, actually, or very positive, actually, because one thing has been that many of our customers so far who's been in volume production is smaller vendors who have maybe not the muscles to push the semiconductor industry to get the number of chipsets they want. So there's been a chipset shortage for many of them, and therefore delayed the technology. Now when sort of the demand from the automotive industry and everything goes down, they will have access to more chipsets. And since we are going against the market now, sort of, and growing with these type of technologies, it's going to be very positive for us that we can actually now get the capacity we need and want. So I think it's very good for us as a smaller player. And I agree. I mean, there's a lot of information. I think global foundries are now sort of drawing down the number of employees and see sort of a downturn. But that's positive for us.
All right. Earlier this year, you completed the acquisition of MixComm. What was the rationale behind this acquisition, and how has the integration process proceed?
So there's so many things about MixComm, but for example, MixComm was a deep partner and is very close to Global Foundries, which is one of our sort of main suppliers for chipsets. So they have the very deep into that with them, and that's where we are now as well with these developments that we're doing with the SATCOM, for example. We have a tier 1 customer. That is our first tier 1 when it comes to 5G that we're still working with. We have the SATCOM stuff now that we are sort of open up a $5 billion TAM where we're now getting in, and we can see the orders from that. We have 70% of our sales in the US today, which we've had that without any sort of US presence. So now we have offices in the US, we get closer to that. We have sort of ties into Columbia University and DARPA money and so forth for investment in the future, and possibilities to grow maybe our photonics business and fabs in the US if we like. So we become sort of a US-based company in that sense. And there's 5-6 other more things I can talk about for hours, but it's so important for us. It's very, very transformative acquisition.
So my next question is, what will be your main focus the coming year?
The main focus now is to make sure that we deliver on all these things, all the promises, all the orders we got in, and also keep on building and adding more and more customers to our customer base. So that's what we're working on really, really hard right now.
So you talked a bit about the macro situation going on, but could you please talk a bit more about how are you affected by the current macro situation?
Yeah, so if we start on the boring thing about the war and everything, that has changed the situation quite heavily between East and West, and also the need for military technology, and also people are stopping technology to go to China and the East and so forth. So that has changed things a lot, and I think we started to turn that over a bit earlier already. So we have 90% of our sales in Europe and the US. So that macro situation is quite good for us right now, because we have supply chains in the West and we don't have supply chains in the East. So that's a very important piece to have now when we're delivering to military like US Army or Lockheed Martin and all of those. So we are in a very good position for that. Overall, the backside, of course, is that there's large markets like China and so forth that we can't really sell into the same way right now and focus on that, even if we're trying to find ways of doing that. And you can see large companies like NVIDIA is sort of doing sort of slower CPUs that they can still sell without sort of circumvent the Biden sort of recent regulations and so forth. So there's a lot of things in this happening in the market that needs to be sort of understood and what you can do and so forth. But I think overall we're well positioned to take advantage of this right now. And as we can see with all of these military applications that we're part of now, that we will be able to do that. That military is often high margins and very safe suppliers and that sort of.
Thank you very much, Anders. Thank you.
Thank you so much.